This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Oteli Edwards. Tonight's top stories. East Asia braces for Trump 2.0, empowered by a potential Republican trifecta. The GOP has already seized control of the Senate. We'll go live to Beijing, Tokyo, and Taipei for reaction. Also, more expert analysis on how a Trump victory could impact the region's future and why the next 5 years could be crucial for the US-China rivalry. And markets dip in mainland China as investors worry about more possible tariffs from a second Trump administration. We dive into how American businesses in China see their future in this high-stakes landscape. Ahead on East Asia Tonight, from Trump dancing compilations to Kamala Harris memes, our correspondent takes a closer look into how certain quirks of U.S. politics have crept into the lives of Chinese citizens. Donald Trump looks poised to return to the White House, with vote counting still underway in key battleground states. Well, the U.S. presidential race has yet to be called, and his Democratic rival Kamala Harris hasn't conceded. But the Republican leader still claimed a victory and thanked his supporters. Well, he spoke soon after he was projected to win in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia.
This was a movement like nobody's ever seen before. And frankly, this was, I believe, the greatest political movement of all time. There's never been anything like this in this country, and maybe beyond. This will truly be the golden age of America. That's what we have to have. This is a magnificent victory for the American people that will allow us to make America great again.
Trump is closing in on the 270 electoral college votes needed to defeat Harris. The count is now 267 for him versus 224 for Harris. Well, Trump has a 2-point lead over Harris in Pennsylvania, with more than 96% of the votes tallied. It's widely seen as the most pivotal state in this election. Both candidates have spent much time and resources there, with Trump the target of an assassination attempt in Butler in July. Another swing state, North Carolina, also projecting a win for Trump, giving him a further 16 electoral votes. Democrats have won the state only twice since 1968, most recently in 2008, when voters backed Barack Obama. Well, Trump won there in the past 2 elections. Well, Georgia, the latest battleground to project a win for Trump, gives him a crucial edge of 16 electoral votes. Republicans have sought to restore the state's longtime status as a Republican stronghold since Joe Biden's victory in 2020. Well, some other swing states with results not yet called. It's a close fight, but Trump remains in the lead in all of them. A winner may soon be called in Wisconsin, with about 97% of ballots counted. The state holds 10 electoral votes. It was won by Trump 8 years ago, but lost to Biden in 2020. Before that, Wisconsin was a Democratic stronghold for almost 28 years. Next is Nevada, with about 93% of the ballots counted. Trump's currently ahead in the small state of 3 million people that holds 6 electoral votes. Nevada has voted Democrat since 2008, with Trump losing by just more than 2 points in 2016 and 2020. The battleground state of Michigan also in focus. With about 89% of the ballots counted, Trump remains in the lead. Michigan holds 15 electoral votes for the winner. Republicans, meantime, have won control of the U.S. Senate, retaking the chamber for the first time in 4 years. It positions the Republican Party to play a huge role in determining key policies and appointing justices to the U.S. Supreme Court. While the victory is assured for the Republicans, the final figure is still up in the air. They've secured at least 51 seats at the moment, after flipping Democratic seats in West Virginia and Ohio. Democrats, on the other hand, currently have 42 seats in hand. They previously held a narrow majority in the Senate.
We have taken back control of the Senate. Wow, that's good. And the Senate races in Montana, Nevada, Texas, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. They were tough races, and I mean, the number of victories in the Senate was absolutely incredible.
And Mr. Trump is now on track to achieve something that a Republican candidate hasn't done in 20 years, and that's to win the popular vote. Currently, he has the lead over Ms. Harris by more than 5 million votes. Meantime, U.S. stock futures rising sharply as former President Donald Trump's retaking the White House looks like a done deal. The Dow Jones Industrial Average popping more than 1,000 points, or 2.7%. S&P 500 futures gaining 2.2%, and Nasdaq up 1.8%. The dollar index, which measures the currency against 6 major peers, including the euro and yen, advancing 1.5%, while Bitcoin has rallied to an all-time high amid a jump in the so-called Trump trades. It's now up more than 7% after rallying as much as 8.63% to reach a record of more than $75,000. Well, the U.S. election outcome could have major ramifications for East Asia and its allies in the region, with China, which is Washington's largest rival, observing its next moves amid heightened tensions, while Japan, South Korea and Taiwan are also bracing for potential impact on relations. And now we are joined by our correspondents. We have Olivia Seong in Beijing, Michio Ishida in Tokyo, and Victoria Jen in Taipei. First to you, Olivia. East Asia getting ready for Trump 2.0. First, let's talk about the reactions out of China. There must be plenty coming from Xiaohongshu and Weibo and all the social media sites, I imagine.
That's right, Atali. Lots of buzz being generated as Mr. Trump has declared victory. We've seen the Chinese media outlets being prompt in throughout the day as the developments came in and the results came in fast and furious, shooting to the top of Chinese social media platform Weibo with the hashtags Trump wins the 2024 U.S. election and Trump officially declares victory. And interestingly also, there's this chart on Weibo measuring netizens' emotions in their post, and it has the majority, or about 30%, showing a neutral sort of mood, while about 20% said that they were happy and 11% angry. Some netizens commenting that the economic war between China and the U.S. is going to start again and calling for businesses to brace themselves. And we've been talking to many Chinese from all walks of life through these past few weeks and in the last few days. The consensus, though, is that China and U.S. relations are set for a rocky road ahead. Have a listen.
很重要，因为说句实话其实今年大选就是大家讨论，其实不是特朗普和哈里斯，是不是特朗普，就是是不是哈里斯不重要，关键是不是特朗普很重要。
我感觉中国的政策会有一种比较长项的既定战略，就不会因为说两党之间哪一个选上哪一个没选上会比较大幅度的调整，但是会有类似外交研判的这种微调吧。
Bracing also, China has been, as both candidates have been seen to talk tough on China, and also as there has been bipartisan support on both sides of the House. And as we've seen the other results come in, that, there's likely going to be consensus for stronger action against China. Ateli.
Yeah, Olivia, perhaps you could elaborate on that about stronger action, because this U.S. election outcome will perhaps affect China's strategic calculations, particularly with regards to trade as well as regional security.
Atili, that was a question that was posed today at the Foreign Ministry's daily briefing that I attended, the spokesperson being asked that exact same question. But I must emphasize that this briefing took place before Mr. Trump took the stage to declare a victory in this election. But here's what the spokesperson had to say.
我们对美国的政策是一以贯之的，我们将继续按照相互尊重、和平共处、合作共赢的原则看待和处理中美关系。
Now, in the long term, what analysts are saying is that China has already been preparing for what it has acknowledged will be a competitive relationship with the United States. And therefore, we've seen that increasing talk about the need to be self-reliant, to count on innovation, and to develop new productive forces, especially in advanced technologies like solar panels and electric vehicles. The big question, though, is what sort of short-term moves China could take in response to what we may possibly see in the second Trump presidency. An indication of what may come. Mr. Trump has spoken about imposing tariffs on imported goods of about 10 to 20% and an additional 60% tariffs on Chinese goods specifically. Now, the foreign ministry was asked how China would handle that, but the spokesperson said that she would not answer any hypothetical questions, reiterating its line that the U.S. presidential election is an internal affair of the U.S. But we do also know that right now, in these few days, that there is an important meeting by China's top legislature, lawmakers gathering as we are expecting them to announce some possible policy moves to boost China's slowing economy. There are some analysts who say that if Trump were to be elected, this could mean that lawmakers announce a bigger stimulus package. Although other analysts have disagreed with that view, we should know in the coming days. But another big thing that's been in focus is what the Trump presidency, Trump 2.0, could mean for U.S. allies in the region, and something that China has been watching closely is that exactly. And Mitch, in Japan, we'd be keen to know how is Japan reacting? What sort of implications could there be for the U.S.-Japan alliance?
Thanks for the question, Olivia. Well, Japan has been stepping up its alliance with the U.S., not only bilaterally, but also in multilateral framework on the back of tension building up in the region. U.S., Japan, Philippines framework was launched this year. U.S., Japan, South Korea framework was repaired. There's the Quad with Australia and India. And Mr. Trump, during his first term, chanted the concept of a free and open Indo-Pacific, a concept actually planted by then Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Mr. Abe formed very close ties with Mr. Trump. And this April, Mr. Abe's friend, former Prime Minister Taro Aso, met with Mr. Trump for about an hour in New York to confirm the alliance stance and shared views on world affairs, including on China and North Korea. Also, Mr. Aso received Mr. Trump's backing on Japan's defense and security posture, according to reports. Now, Japan is in the process of increasing its defense budget from 1% of its GDP to 2% in 5 years. Next, political watchers think new Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba will stop by the U.S. after attending APEC in Peru and G20 in Brazil this month to greet the incoming U.S. president. But before that, he needs to be reelected as Prime Minister next week, following his party, the Liberal Democratic Party's losing a majority in the general election.
All right, Michio, I'm just wondering on the business front, any forecast on that? Because, you know, in the news, we know that leading up to tonight, Washington, they did postpone a decision about whether to block Japan's Nippon Steel from acquiring U.S. steel, citing national security concerns. And that's just one of the issues being raised. But what about its forecast on business?
Well, Japan is a top foreign investor in the U.S., and Japan's presence has long been felt in the United States, particularly in the auto sector. You know, big names such as Toyota, Honda, and Nissan have plants there. In North Carolina, Toyota has recently invested in the electric vehicle battery plant, and that has attracted more Japanese companies in related fields to invest. Now, as you mentioned, making the news was Nippon Steel's acquisition of U.S. Steel, which was announced last December. Both companies with over a century-old history was blocked by both the Biden administration and Mr. Trump, calling the deal as a security threat. Now, Japan's largest business organization, Keidanren, with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and other U.S. industrial entities, wrote jointly to U.S. Secretary of Treasury Janet Yellen in September to express concerns of political interference in business deals. Now, currently, the deal is on halt, and it's uncertain if this deal will go through under the Trump or the Harris administration.
Right. We also want perspectives and updates from Taiwan, but I'm going to come to you in a bit, Victoria. But first time, I just want to touch on South Korea, which is a close security ally of the U.S. in the Indo-Pacific. And Trump's victory adds an element of unpredictability, in fact, signaling a change in U.S. security commitments and Washington's policy on Pyongyang.
There are concerns in South Korea that one of the first things Mr. Trump will do when he takes office is to demand more from South Korea for the 28,500 U.S. troops based here. The two countries already agreed this year that South Korea will pay $1.1 billion in 2026 as part of this 5-year defense cost sharing. But analysts say Mr. Trump is likely to demand renegotiations with South Korea, a country he has earlier referred to as a money machine and a rich country. South Korea is unsure if Mr. Trump will once again threaten to pull out the U.S. soldiers from South Korea if South Korea is not willing to pay what he wants, and that could be between $5 to $10 billion as he has hinted before, or, as some analysts have suggested, Mr. Trump could instead demand that South Korea play a greater expanded role in regional operations as part of U.S. efforts to deal with China. The reports that North Korea has deployed more than 10,000 troops to Russia have made things very complicated for South Korea and possibly also the United States. Mr. Trump to South Koreans was seen as a very unpredictable man during his first term in office. And so many analysts here say with Trump back in the White House, South Korea is unsure what his plan is regarding North Korea and whether he'll be able to get along with President Yoon Suk-yeol, who has taken a very hardline stance towards North Korea since he took office. Lim Yang-suk, CNA, Seoul.
Right, let's bring you in now, Victoria. I'm curious to know, with the news, with the potential Trump 2.0, how exactly is Taipei reacting to the results?
Well, Trump's victory is something of a concern for many Taiwanese because Trump has said that Taiwan should pay the U.S. more protection fees against the military threat from China. And so obviously he wants Taiwan to increase its military spending. In fact, he has said that Taiwan should spend up to 10% of its GDP on defense. And currently, Taiwan spends nearly 3% of its GDP on military spending, and it's already a record high. So many Taiwanese fear that Taiwan simply cannot afford to make such payment, make that much of money on military spending. So another concern is TSMC. Trump has said that, has accused Taiwan of stealing chip business from the U.S. So now that he is likely to be the president, there is speculation that he's going to pressure TSMC to expand its investment in the U.S. and possibly transfer its core technology to the American soil. And this is likely to hollow out Taiwan's semiconductor industry, which is the backbone of Taiwan's economy. So his victory has made many Taiwanese very nervous.
Right. And of course, Trump has also expressed his doubts, about the benefits of supporting Taiwan. It's sort of all aligned with his America First policy. So based on, speaking to all the experts and people on the ground, do you then think that Trump's return is going to take a toll on not just Taiwan's security, but economically as well?
It's really hard to say at this point because many of the things that Trump has said during his campaign are contradictory. For instance, he has expressed doubts about supporting Taiwan, but at the same time, he threatened to bomb Beijing if China attacks Taiwan. So it's really hard to predict what exactly that Trump would do. But one thing is certain, according to many analysts, is that Trump is likely to take a more confrontational approach towards China. just like he did in his first term. And this is likely to increase tensions across the Taiwan Strait. But having said that, he still has not, he has declined to say whether the U.S. would come to Taiwan's aid if China attacks. So basically, he is maintaining strategic ambiguity in dealing with cross-strait matters. At the same time, he's going to keep a close watch on Taiwan so that it doesn't do anything to provoke Beijing and disrupt the peace and stabilities across the Taiwan Strait. Back to you.
Trump's unpredictability, certainly a concern to all these countries. Thank you so very much, Olivia Seong in Beijing, Michio Ishida in Tokyo, and Victoria Jen in Taipei. And for more insights into the impact of the U.S. presidential election, we will be speaking with Song Hyun-yi later this hour on East Asia Tonight. Well, he's an associate at the Harvard University Asia Center. Now, time now for a short break, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, we look at the market reaction out of mainland China as Donald Trump looks set to cap a stunning political comeback, stoking concerns of heightened tensions over trade and technology. And Toyota keeps its annual net profit forecast unchanged, despite logging a 26% drop for the first half of this financial year. Hello again. You're just in time for a business update, and Roland is standing by to give us an update about, with this whole, Trump presidency, the prospect of that risking heightened tensions over trade and technology. What else can you tell us about that?
Well, that is definitely one of the major concerns. And I'll talk about how investor sentiment is playing out on the mainland equity markets in a bit. But first, regardless of who wins the White House or Congress, the trade war between the United States and China is unlikely to ease, and it has impacted business communities on both sides of the Pacific. So how does the American business community in China view its prospects in the country? Well, CNA's Tan Yu-guan speaks to the American Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai.
The American business community has been one of the hardest hit by the trade war between the U.S. and China. With change in the air in Washington, what does the American business community here hopes from the next White House administration? To get a good idea of that, I spoke to the chairman of the American Chamber of Commerce, Alan Garbo, here at the 7th China International Import Expo in Shanghai.
The companies that we represent, the vast majority of them are not making any major moves away from China. We have tremendous buying power here in this country, and not everything that is purchased by China overlaps sensitive areas of national security. So the market potential for many U.S. companies still remains very strong.
What does the American business community here in China hope from the next White House administration?
AmCham Shanghai has been in existence since 1915. We've had the opportunity to work with multiple administrations over the years. And our role is to be a bridge. And I'm confident that regardless of the administration, the AmCham Shanghai role will continue to be important and helpful.
China's trade surplus with the United States has been a bone of contention and a source of tensions between the two countries. Do you think there's a way to close that gap?
Last year, our members signed $500 million US in trade deals here. This year, they're running 400 million plus. So we have to wait and see what happens between now and the end of the week. But I'm optimistic.
Despite tensions between the U.S. and China, a survey by AmCham showed that expatriates actually have showed an increased willingness to relocate to China. Why do you think that is?
China is a good place to live and work. It's been a great professional experience for many of us. Yes, after COVID, we do see the return of many expats. I think what's changed, though, is that the demographics of the expats have changed a bit. Today, if you have a large family, that's pretty costly to educate in China. So we tend to see more younger colleagues coming over from our home countries.
A look at the mainland markets amid a clear signal that investors expect a second Trump administration. Stock markets lower in mainland China and sharply down in Hong Kong, which is more indicative of foreign investor sentiment, with investors speculating that China's technology, defense, and export sectors will be in the crosshairs of Trump protectionist policies. The Chinese currency also weakening against the dollar. Other Asian currencies also under pressure as the dollar looks set for its biggest one-day rise since March of 2020. The Japanese yen, Korean won, and the Singapore dollar all sliding. A Trump win boosting the prospects of sweeping tax cuts, more tariffs, and deregulation, seen as a boost for the greenback. Japan's Nikkei 225 ending at a 3-week high led by chip and defense stocks. A weaker yen tends to boost Japanese exports overseas earnings. The Kospi, however, closing in the red. Toyota's recent record run hitting a road bump with its first quarterly profit drop in 2 years. And that's as weaker sales and production issues in two key markets, that's the US and Japan, slowed its sales momentum. The world's top-selling automaker's net profit dropped to around $3.8 billion for the 3 months ended September, and that's a 55% drop from a year ago. And for the first half of this financial year, it reported a profit of $12.4 billion. That's a 26% drop year on year. Toyota has cut its vehicle production target by 1% to around 11 million units for the current fiscal year. That's 240,000 units fewer than last year. The world's top-selling automaker had been on a record profit run, benefiting from its heavy focus on more affordable hybrid models, an area of growing consumer interest compared to costlier EVs. But quality issues at its truck and bus unit, that's Hino Motors, as well as a now-resolved production suspension of 2 models in the US, have slowed its sales momentum in recent months. Shares in Toyota closing more than 1% higher ahead of the earnings call. And that is the latest in business.
Well, thanks so very much, Roland, for that. Well, we're going to go for another short break now, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, with Donald Trump poised to retake the White House, we speak to an expert on what his second term may mean for China, Japan, and South Korea. We're bringing you the latest from U.S. Votes 2024. And Donald Trump claimed victory and thanked his supporters after he was projected to win in the key battleground states of Pennsylvania, Georgia, and North Carolina. Well, Trump's win in Pennsylvania puts him just 3 electoral votes shy of defeating Kamala Harris to win the White House. Trump also flipped Georgia, which he narrowly lost 4 years ago. And prior to that, Georgia was solidly Republican for 3 decades. Trump retained the closely contested state of North Carolina. Democrats have won the state only twice since 1968, most recently in 2008 when voters backed Barack Obama. Meantime, congratulatory messages from world leaders have been pouring in for Trump ahead of an official result. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi hailed it a historic election victory. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that Trump's win is a powerful recommitment to the alliance between his country and the U.S. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, meantime, says he appreciates Trump's approach of peace through strength in global affairs. And earlier we spoke with Eric Kenter. He's the former U.S. Republican House Majority Leader. And he noted how Donald Trump had remodeled the Republican Party.
Since 2016, the Republican Party has become Donald Trump's party. It's certainly a very different party than what used to be. And I think in response to where the populace is and where people are in terms of what they're feeling about being insecure, about feeling that America is not living up to its potential, I think he is the one for the times and will lead us forward. So I'm very optimistic about the next several years. Hopefully my party will maintain control. They did lose control of the United States Senate. So they will be a minority party. I think they're going to have to certainly regroup. I think where they should learn is the fact that their agenda went so far left that it just did not coincide with where the majority of Americans are. And whether it comes to energy policy, whether it was border policy, whether it was healthcare policy, you name it, the Democratic Party, I believe, at its core, has to rediscover where it should be to try and meet the public, because clearly this was a mandate given to the Republicans under Donald Trump's ticket.
And for more insights into the results of the U.S. presidential election, we have with us Dr. Song-Hyun Lee joining us from Boston, Massachusetts. Now, he's an associate at Harvard University Asia Center. Well, thanks so very much, Dr. Lee, for joining us. Well, President Donald Trump, he's virtually back in the White House. But he has this track record of slapping massive tariff hikes and a trade war against China. So we know that, Mr. Trump can be rather unpredictable, but how do you expect U.S.-Sino relations to roll out from here?
Well, first of all, good to join you. It's 5 o'clock in the morning in Boston. It's like a moment in life that you wake up in the morning and discover a completely new world. And I think we are entering a Trumpian uncharted territory, or a completely new world. When it comes to U.S.-China relations, I think many people are paying attention to it. Trump, during the presidential election, said that he will impose 60% of all the goods imported from China. And I think that if that's the only thing that he does with China, I think that's rather welcoming from the side of China. I think Trump will something else when it comes to Taiwan issue, something else like the U.S. Military alliance with Asian countries such as South Korea, Japan. And I think there are some hawkish Trump advisors from Chinese perspective, hawkish advisors who will be very tough on China. So I think we will see all sorts of, from Chinese perspective, unexpected, uncomfortable aspects that they will need to prepare. At the same time, some segments of the Chinese analytic community also expect that Trump has this transactional element that might open a room for dialogue and cooperation between U.S. and China. So we are entering into a uncharted territory, and welcome to the Trumpian world.
Yeah, well, Dr. Lee, I can't help but notice you've mentioned uncharted territory twice in that first answer you gave us. I'm wondering if that's linked also to the fact that experts, they have been raising concerns that with Trump he would most likely withdraw American troops from South Korea, pushing Seoul perhaps to even grow its own nuclear capability. I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, how feasible is this?
I think for the conventional U.S. politicians, this is an option they will not consider, unlikely to consider. But for Trump, that is a feasible option. Trump is reluctant to put his American troops stationed in South Korea at the same time in Japan. Trump thinks that this is a waste of American taxpayers' money, and Trump is willing to and threatened to pull U.S. troops out of South Korea. In that case, South Korea is exposed to direct threats coming from the North Korea. And what are the options South Korea need to do? South Korea need to defend itself. In that case, conventional weapons might not be enough when you deal with a nuclear-armed North Korea. So the debate about South Korea going nuclear will get more fierce in South Korea. And as of today, average about 70% of South Korean citizens want to develop indigenous nuclear weapons. Under the Trump administration, that desire, the debate will get much more fierce, particularly against the backdrop of North Korea already sent troops in Russia fighting against Ukraine, and the people are debating the role of South Korea against the menacing threat coming from North Korea as well.
Yeah, well, that's interesting to note, because I want to talk about Japan now. And Japan seemingly has a better rapport with Trump. But now that there is going to be a new cabinet in Japan, how do you foresee U.S.-Japan relations to proceed from here on?
This is a very interesting question. Conventional wisdom tells us that Japan is probably the closest ally of the United States in Asia Pacific. That is true. At the same time, Japan is also preparing for a Trumpian world, that is unpredictability, uncharted territory that I repeating in this interview. And it's very interestingly, for the first time in 5 years, Japanese Foreign Ministry resuscitated vocabulary in its foreign policy blueprint, designating China as a strategic partner. That's very interesting as an ally of the United States to call China as a strategic partner. What that means is that Japan is also thinking about Plan B option when there is a possibility of facing a Trump administration, that there will be uncertainty and Japan needs to manage its relationship with China, just like many other countries are thinking about facing uncertainty. So there is a room for dialogue and negotiation with China. That's something that they're thinking about. At the same time, cooperating with the United States of the Trump administration as well. So Japan is a very strong stronghold of ally of the United States. At the same time, even we need to think about that. Even Japan is also thinking about Plan B option, particularly under the new Prime Minister Ishiba. And this is very interesting, unexpected development, both in the United States and also in Japan as well, leadership changes.
Also, I just want to go back to U.S.-China rivalry, and you've said something very interesting before, that we are still in the early stage of U.S.-China rivalry, but it's the next 5 years that's going to be pivotal, especially the role of a political leader. You've mentioned it's about not making mistakes. It's going to be as important as making the right choices. Are you optimistic then that Trump will be able to do just that?
That's a very interesting question. The 5 year time period is not my invention. People here in the United States also think that the next 5 years, even Jake Sullivan and other U.S. Diplomats acknowledge that, recognize that next coming 5 years is very critical for the United States, also U.S.-China relations. And I think that many people, some people tend to see the election of Trump again as not as the success of Trump, but more as a failure of American democracy. And if you believe that that a person like Trump, who have many human failings, but then despite the fact that American people experienced Trump for the last 4 years, previous 4 years, but still re-elect Trump back to the White House, I think it tells us something about collective American psyche, that the failure of the so-called Washington political establishment, American people are disillusioned with established American politics, and they wanted some new leadership, and Trump showed up at the right time, right moment. But then Trump might not turn out to be the new messiah character that American people might want to expect. At the same time, Trump projects himself as something, someone who appears to something very fundamental to American public. That is that the key issues, when I traveled to some of the key states eastern key states in America, for example, I traveled to Pennsylvania 3 times in the past few months, and I think people are talking about 2 key issues: immigration and inflation. And I think Trump successfully owned the agenda, and I think Trump has this character. But then when it comes to the longer term period of America's place in the world, American global leadership, America's relationship with allies, America's how it deals with its adversaries like China and Russia, even North Korea. I think America under Trump will be more like an inward-looking America that we are unfamiliar with, that we used to see America as a global leader. But then, America will be more inwardly focused. It's America first policy. We will see more protectionism. So what I'm saying is that we will see a very different face of America than what we accustomed in the past. And this is something that we should get used to it. At the same time, how America manages itself will have repercussions, not for the future of America, but the rest of the world. The role of America is so important that sometimes I even feel that we should not let America alone make its international decisions. This is a moment that also countries like Singapore, I remember that Singapore foreign minister a few years ago visited Washington and appealed that America and China should stop its rivalry. I think the role of what other countries say to the U.S.-China rivalry, I think it's also important. There's room for the middle powers, other countries like Singapore, to modify, to play the role of a bridging role in the U.S.-China rivalry as well.
Right. Thank you so very much for your insights there, Dr. Song Hyun Lee from the Harvard University Asia Center. Well, moving on now to some breaking news to share. Well, from media outlet Edison, Trump has enough electoral votes to win the U.S. presidential election. Reuters as well has chimed in to say that he is the projected winner of Wisconsin, thereby helping Trump get past the magic number of 270. And we will be updating you with more news as they come through. And earlier on, my colleagues Arnold Gay and Julie Yu, they spoke with Danny Kwa. He's the Dean and Economics Professor at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, and Drew Thompson, Senior Fellow at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies. And they started by asking Mr. Thompson if America is obsessed with being the number one superpower in the world when it comes to dealing with China.
China is sort of an abstract concept. Most Americans are focused on their day-to-day issues, their local issues. If you look at this election, China was barely mentioned, right? The key issues were democracy, abortion, immigration, the economy, of course. So I don't think that maintaining primacy in quite that way is what motivates American government and American strategy. Americans aren't fixated on their GDP growth numbers. It's a good barometer for how things are doing and sentiment, but it's not like the United States has political targets for economic growth the way China does. Okay. In China, everything's politicized. Right. So I think regardless of who won this outcome, there's one person we know who's going to be here in 2025, and that's Xi Jinping. He's not up for election. So I think there's a pathway that Xi Jinping has placed China on, and the U.S. has a path dependency. And that path dependency is really going to end up in competition. So the challenge for the next administration, whichever it is really managing that competition so it doesn't devolve into conflict.
Let me disagree a bit with my colleague, Drew, here, that one of the reasons that China was not mentioned too much in the race, in this presidential race, was that both candidates agreed that they would be hawkish on China. There was no clear blue water between them. As to whether Americans do think about competition with China, I think they do. But, the way in which they think about this is, what's the bilateral trade deficit with China? Is China cheating on electric vehicles? Is China getting ahead in technology? Is China's subsidies overwhelming our people? Is China stealing all our jobs, dismantling our industry, turning into ghost towns where once thriving middle-class American communities? I think all of those issues are indeed on American people's minds. But the problem is that it's not very clearly directed. What are the actions that America should take on this? And there's a blunt instrument that Trump is going back to. The problem is bilateral trade deficits. The ordinary, everyday American has no idea what the bilateral trade deficit is. But nonetheless, that's what is identified as the problem. We must slap tariffs on imports from China. That will fix everything. It will raise revenues for us. But actually, of course, it won't. It will be Americans who pay the tariff. Mm-hmm. It'll be a discouragement to China to produce more EVs. And that's actually bad for the world. We're in the midst of an energy transition. The world needs more electric vehicles. Discouraging China, the market leader at this point, from producing electric vehicles is actually bad for the environment. But that's the state of the debate. So I'm afraid that we are not, precisely because we have not had the clarity in debating what the policy on China should be, because there seemed to be an alignment. Going forwards, we're not going to be very clear. America is not going to be very clear about how it deals with China, except in a blunt, unhelpful way.
Coming up next on East Asia tonight, see how the U.S. presidential election have taken a life of its own on social media in China. You're watching East Asia tonight right here on CNA, and in case you're just joining us, Reuters reporting that the National Election Pool, along with Edison Research, are projecting that Republican Donald Trump has won the U.S. presidential election. Well, the U.S. presidential race has reached a fever pitch in China, with Chinese social media abuzz in the final hours of polling. But it's not just the outcome that has people talking. From Trump dancing compilations to Kamala Harris memes, the quirks of this election have become as big a story as the stakes themselves. Well, CNA's Lauren Ong with a report.
It's a popular eatery in Beijing. Known for its traditional dishes, some might even recall its brush with U.S.-China history. Then, U.S. Vice President Joe Biden visited the shop in 2011 while on an official trip to China, in what Chinese newspapers then dubbed as noodle diplomacy. Pictures of his visit used to line the walls in this branch as recently as 2020, but he emerged victorious in the last presidential race. But after they were taken down during renovations, they never made their way back.
对一些其他的一些呢，我们就是不是特别的关心啊。但是呢，作为我们一个中国人，我们就是希望就是世界和平，世界人民都友好。对，这是我们最大的一个初心和我们的一个愿望。
Instead, Ms. Yao says the restaurant's focus is on serving the best dishes.
Well, as the Biden era fades into history, China is watching intently as the race for the White House comes to a close. The stakes are high. The next U.S. president could shape relations with China for the coming years, with echoes felt in global trade, diplomacy, as well as security, according to experts. But beyond the corridors of power, what lies in the hearts and minds of ordinary Chinese citizens?
Search for any posts on the U.S. election across Chinese social media, and you'll likely come across videos like these of former President Donald Trump. Chinese netizens have called this the bath-scrubbing dance. A meme of Vice President Kamala Harris has even trickled into Weibo, showing uncanny parallels between her and this Simpsons cartoon character that became president. The online chatter reached a new high when polls started to open, with this hashtag topping trending charts on Weibo at one point. But according to the platform's poll, more than half of the respondents felt neutral about the election.
会关注吧，因为这个无论是各个方面吧，经济啊，还有政治啊，各个方面，文化这方面都会多多少少会受影响吧。
重要吧，我感觉还是对，我感觉对我们这边影响还挺大的。其实就是对贸易啊什么的，我也不知道说好，但是感觉是不太好，因为它那个贸易的它有压制嘛。
Beyond social media, shares of Chinese company Ysoft, whose Chinese name sounds like Trump wins big, rallied the past week, as it did after Trump won the election in 2016. There's even an exhibition in Beijing's art district showcasing the power of campaign merchandise sourced from Yiwu in eastern China. The Chinese city is known as the world's largest wholesale market for small commodity goods, and its track record in accurately predicting the outcome of the U.S. election based on sales figures of those campaign merchandise. Although, what's clear according to analysts is that regardless of who wins, the China-US rivalry is set to continue. Lauren Ong, CNA, Beijing.
And we'll have much more coverage of the U.S. presidential election with Donald Trump, the projected winner, expected to return to the White House in January of next year. Stay tuned at 11 p.m. Singapore-Hong Kong time, where we will be speaking with our correspondents as well as guests to unpack the results and understand what this will mean for the region and the rest of the world. And that's all we've got for you in East Asia tonight this Wednesday. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. And you can always look us up on Facebook, YouTube, and on X. We're going to leave you with some of the highlights of CNA's coverage of Election Day in the U.S.
CNA's multi-platform coverage of the U.S. election for the next 9 hours.
Undoubtedly be an unforgettable night in U.S. politics.
I feel very confident. I have, we went in with a very big lead today.
This truly represents the best of who we are. Just reaching out to folks, letting them know that we're all in it together.
The path to presidency comes down to that magic number, 270 electoral votes. 7 swing states are key to victory.
Most of the countries in Asia, even the more populous ones, were small economies. We're not very diversified. So we look at America and we look at who's president there, see what they can deliver to us.
I think regardless of who won this outcome, there's one person we know who's going to be here in 2025, and that's Xi Jinping.
On the Democratic side, you want to make sure you've lost before you acknowledge that you've lost.
We will continue overnight to fight to make sure that every vote is counted, that every voice has spoken.
But obviously the Republicans and Trump, they're going to look for as quick a call as they can.
This is a magnificent victory for the American people that will allow us to make America great again.